Okay, so hello everyone. So nice to have you here. So this is like our the third lecture in the series, guest lecture series, on where we're looking at Bateson, or the ideas of Bateson and his idea of a pattern that connects, and how this kind of relates to current questions of ecological aesthetics and kind of the more than human world. And in this, we have already had two presentations, one by Ben Sweeting, where he looked more at the question of ethics from this Batesonian perspective. The second one was more on political ecology and how the idea of the urban political relates to the Batesonian idea of aesthetics and, of course, the sacred. And today we have Marie Davidová, and she will, of course, so this will be, I think, the kind of turn also towards the more kind of practical project-based discussions.
Exactly.
So Marie is at the moment a junior research group leader at the Cluster of Excellence of Integrative Computational Design and Construction for Architecture at the University of Stuttgart. And apart from that, Marie was also selected as one of the top 10 in the Systemic Design Association, which she was part of. And I think it's very interesting because there they have kind of also placed her portfolio of work among, I think, leading systemic design researchers. So those of you who want to take a look at her work. But apart from the many interesting things that Marie is doing, we have, that her interest in kind of the systemic approach to architectural performance. And of course, how she has been kind of leading this research by co-design field. And in this, we see that she has always been looking at least in her work, or from her early work, I think, on wood research, right? Working with wood and materiality of wood, the kind of generative co-design agency across species, which is very interesting. And second, we see in her work this very interesting turn towards a full-scale urban prototype, which I think for some of you might be very interesting. For those of you who are basically kind of looking at this seminar for inspiration for a studio project. And then she's also been looking at how one would map complexity when working with these different stakeholders in these kind of projects using giga mapping, which I think is something which she can also share with us, and which has also been helping to kind of develop as a kind of technique of mapping and working with complexity. And last but not least, I think she's also been involved in the question of knowledge transfer, and how this kind of projects could then relate to some kind of a DIY recipe, right, which could then be used by different communities across the world and kind of appropriated across contexts. So we're very happy to have Marie here, and so it's over to you, Marie.
Thank you very much, Rumini. So I guess I will share my screen. And yeah, we are somewhere. Oh my God. Yeah, here we are. Hello, everybody. So I will discuss something which is part of my field, which is a Real Life Codesign Laboratory. It's a bit different. I'm sure many of you heard of the word, the Real World Laboratory. The Real Life Codesign Laboratory is a little bit different because it is actually about co-designing through real life, not just testing through real life. And there is this difference between those two words. So I will just go to the topic about Gregory Bateson. So what connects the crab, the lobster, and the orchid, and what does it connecting to me and to you? So what is the question, right? So we will be discussing those topics in the terms of like real world. Because like what connects us is actually the real life interaction, what I believe. I mean, you can sort of imagine the connections when you go to sleep, but the real life when you interact with the lobster, and those awkward restaurants that sell the real life lobsters, and I don't know, I feel like I will puke whenever I see those restaurants with the lobsters when they are freezing the lobsters and they are alive and they are selling them. So I feel very strong connection with the lobster, and I always think that I should sort of interact and do something, and I know that I cannot because it is legal, and that I will be actually sued if I do something for the lobster. But we all have empathy, right? We all have empathy, and we all think the connection of the other beings. So what we will be talking about is multi-centered design, when all people present their own perspectives and you generate empathy across different beings. And it could be people, other beings, whoever, but you generate empathy and you start to understand that different beings have different perspectives, and if you express your perspective and relate to other perspectives, you start understanding that there are actually multi-perspectives and you have to relate to those. So exactly what one cybernetician called Kenny said about the third order cybernetics is there is nothing like the real thing. Because there are multiple perspectives, and those multiple perspectives are in fact not real. They are personal to everyone or to every being who have that perspective, and it is not the collective one thing, but we search for synergy within systemic design. We search for synergy across multiple perspectives. Which doesn't really mean that everybody is happy, which means connecting what is with what if, and that is something like that you find the synergy across multiple perspectives, and not everybody is 100% happy, but everybody is kind of happy. And you generate the synergetic future. So that is for cross beings co-living across humans, other species, can be artificial intelligence, can be robots, whatsoever. So how I typically start my work, and as Dominic kind of introduced, this lecture will be really down to earth about doing things, not so theoretical like you've seen before. So typically we start with minimap when you sort of map your own perspective, your own individual perspective, and then you start relating within gigamap. So you every kind of being maps their map, and then they start relating across the table into the gigamap, and they start searching for synergy. And with that synergy, they start designing something full scale, which they could do together. And then they put it into something I call Real Life Codesign Laboratory, which means that you prototype something within the group of people. You put it into the real life, and that gets redesigned and interacted through real life stakeholders who are there. So the algae starts growing on your prototype, and whoever starts, we were always asked about vandalism. Actually, nobody vandalized ever our prototypes because they were just pretty, and people like them. They are pretty, and nobody vandalized them. But you have to, even if we if that we integrate vandalism, that it is an interaction in the real life, and those prototypes start existing in real life, birds starts living in that, and so on, so on. So this is kind of gigamap one of my students did when he mapped different minimaps across our school unit when he was relating different minimaps, and he interpreted each relations, because it's not enough to draw an arrow between different minimaps. You have to interpret relations and understand what is going on across those areas. This is something similar done offline with the prospective students of the World School of Architecture, when they are supposed to generate a multi-species synergetic bridge, and they all mapped their own perspective, and then they start relating across the table, and all this team has to design and build one model of a synergetic bridge across the table, right? This becomes more messy when you have a bit more diversified community, and you have children and so on. So this becomes very funny, and sometimes you even have to interact, go to pub and show your things to the people who are just relaxing on Sunday. What are those prototypes, right? So this is an example of a prototype. For this project, we had like €100 budget, and I said for €100 budget, we can just build something out of air. I mean, what can you do for €100 budget, right? And we were asked to make a meeting point for the community festival called Living City. And what we did, I said, well, we build it from air, so we did. So we took those balloons, and how this pavilion was interacting with its environment is that basically there was the morning humidity, right? So this pavilion was actually down in the morning when the festival was not going on, and when the humidity evaporated, it stood up and made a standing point for the festival. So it interacted with its environment and interacted with the people. This is also the example of Real Life Codesign Laboratory, when we built a prototype and we put it into the environment. This is from the opening. This is a dancer who was enacting the pavilion. It was improvisation to interpret the pavilion through real life, and suddenly she co-designs this pavilion by her interaction. So in the previous moment, the co-design was by a relative humidity in the morning. In this it was co-designed by the dancer. And here you can see the same pavilion was co-designed by the blackbird. Basically, it is actually a very important thing because you have a lot of problems with the engineers. They are always asked to design facades where birds cannot nest, and people put the needles on their windows so the birds cannot sit on, and so on. And we are facing really big biodiversity extinction at the moment, and cities are crucial for migration of different species. Some species decided to nest in the cities. Some species actually need to migrate through the cities because the cities are built on rivers, and it is just their migration path. And if they don't have space to sit, they die of extinction. So cities are becoming a very big problems, and we need to adapt our cities for co-living with other species. So for instance, generating some sort of prototypes for the species to sit on is very important, because it generates biodiversity, biocorridors across the cities. Here is similar. It's like uh, uh, like house in the trees, a tree house, where I was asked by the client to generate tree house, and I didn't really want the tree house to nest on the tree. So it is built on the construction that is dancing with the tree together, because it is dependent. The structure is dependent on the tree, and in the same time, it is not putting the tree down. And we grew moss on the platform, so it generates like a bed for the people who are in the house, and otherwise the fabric is removed, as you see here. So the moss is happy, and just when the visitors are there on the weekends, it's closed, and then there is closed environment, and it generates a co-living situation. This is another co-living situation, and this is something very important. It is the discussion of opportunistic use. Opportunistic use was discussed by Ocean North some years ago, like many years ago. But what we did in this project was basically chair is object to sit on. You cannot do too much with chair than to sit on the chair, right? You can sit on it. In maximum, you can stand on it and remove the bulk, but you have not too much opportunities to use it. So the objects for opportunistic use generates opportunities for people to use them. Like these kids are playing on it. There are several people sitting on it. You could climb on it, and several people were growing their vegetables on it. It is some sort of undefined object that is not very clear what it is for, but people find their opportunities, or people or whoever, other species could as well find their opportunities what to do with that thing. And so it's very generative. This is an example of the structure which we co-designed with local scouts. We just provided the design of the structure, and the scouts built it, and they were generating the sort of pockets for onion plants for pollinators to come in the spring. So they were co-designing this and taking care of that, or they were feeding the birds and hanging the structure on the structure. So basically this was co-designed with the community, and the purpose of this object was to integrate with biocorridor with the local community. This is similar thing, and I would like to start the discussion that these projects might be like hyper objective. So this is, for instance, our ecologist who is teaching the kids to do seed bombing with the plants that produce honey for you see that they are planting the seed bombs, and this is the insect hotel. So these honey blooming plants are producing honey for the insects, and these insects are living in this insect hotel. There is also algae on this, and I will get to that later. But let's just keep to that. These insects are actually food for the birds, and bats in the larger connectivity of urban landscape. The insect hotel was intentionally placed on the biocorridor in urban environment, and we would do the social events like teaching kids how to mix their bird food for their balcony, and also having some sort of AR, VR games in the city to stimulate the understanding of the importance of the biocorridor in the central area of Prague. And what we would do, we would actually attach the QR code to this insect hotel. So everybody who is seeing this insect hotel, and people were very interested, like, what is this? And it was actually appearing all over the Facebook. What is this different this weird pineapple on the tree? And some people were tagging me. Maria Davidová can answer this question. So we put the QR code, and this QR code leads to the DIY recipe. So you can go to the DIY recipe and learn how to do this prototype yourself on your own garden if you have a tree or wherever. And this is the QR code. So please scan this QR code and go to our blog. And if you are interested, we have several recipes, not just this one. Please scan this QR code and go to the recipe and follow us on our blog and start reproducing our prototypes in the generative manner. What we started lately, we started having interest in token economy, specifically in blockchain, but however, by now we prototyped only on a token economy, relating different things for multi-species perspectives. So it means that, for instance, butterfly can get paid for pollinating your tomato, and for those tokens, the butterfly can buy your insect hotel where it overwinters and so on. So we started prototyping this system bit widely. This is the application we did. I'm not sure, there is probably not enough time to go to the app, but again, here is the QR code. So if you are interested, please test this app and send us some feedback. It is a prototype. It is not perfect. For instance, there are just like very few definitions of the species and so on, but you can act on behalf of other species and so on. So please scan that and try the app. Basically, this is the gigamap from the practice project where I mapped the same thing and the amount of stakeholders for the areas in Prague 22, where we were mapping with the community, and we defined different stakeholders, and there were ecologists acting on behalf of other species. So we know that we have deer community here, we have bear community here, we have local school, we have people in need who need some houses, and how can all of them behave to each other's advantage. Like people in the need can get a dwelling, and then they take care of the token economy system and produce the community garden and so on, so on. So you see here the map of the stakeholders and what provides who to who. And now I will get to architecture, because I'm also an architect, and this is a project. It's a very old project we did in 2011 with my colleague when we started my practice. And I was telling to my colleague that this was a museum of vernacular culture, and the task was to avoid any paid or any like electricity that would be like out of other resources, like out of unsustainable resources. So I was inspired by the concept of responsive wood and said, like, you know, in those semi-interior spaces, you had to have climate that is kind of like constant, not too humid, not too cold, not too warm, not too dry. And I was inspired by the research on responsive wood, where you have wood that opens and airs in a dry, humid weather and closes in when the relative humidity is too high and the temperature is too low. So I was discussing it with my colleague, and my colleague said, you know, like if you want to implement it into the practice, go and do extensive research on that. It's not so easy. So I did. So I did. This is the responsive screen I worked with. That is opening when the relative humidity is low, and closing when the relative humidity is high. And I grow. This is the airflow simulation about the climate moderation. And what I actually investigated was the co-design to the other species. I grew algae on the top, and you can see that if you grow the algae on the top of the surface, the moisture content of wood is 10% lower, which means that the screen opens more when you need it, and doesn't warp the other direction when you don't really want it when the relative humidity is high, which could disturb other species. This is inspiration from the Norwegian traditional paneling, where they used this system. It's like solid wood panels that are warping and airing the construction. It was used in traditional architecture. I have been also searching for the application of this. So these are Norwegian semi-interior spaces that are using this performance and the different performance which could be used for cross-species co-living. So this is, for instance, what I call a transformer. You can remove the panels according to the needs of the climate and according to of the needs of the use. So the building could be fully enveloped or fully opened based on the situation. This one as well. And it is inhabited by other species. For instance, the algae grows perfectly. The algae doesn't like direct sun, so it grows in the inside. So the semi-interior spaces are providing cross-species co-living across the beings because typically you don't want other species to live in your direct interior, in your heart of the building. But people really enjoy to have this cross-species communication in the semi-interior spaces like balconies or other places. So I have been mapping those places and mapping different uses and different how were the enclosures, and connecting it with hard data like measurements of the temperature, moisture content, and relative humidity of the semi-interior, interior, and exterior. And this is also mapping of the opportunities. This is more soft data mapping of different responsive screens across different continents, which offer different cross-species cohabitation, like this space for co-living with pigeons from Cappadocia, and co-living with, for instance, this breathing wall generates super climate for other plants to grow in the courtyard, which they wouldn't manage to live there otherwise, according to urban heat island, so on, so on. I will just go fast through that. You can all imagine the wasps were living perfectly in those semi-interior spaces here in Norway, so on, so on. Yeah, this is the example from Cappadocia again, what I was mapping. So these are the pigeon houses where the community co-lived with the pigeons in symbiosis. They were generating the perfect climate for the communities living downstairs. They were connected by the channel, and therefore the people could live in those caves. These are other caves, so that has been mapped as well, and all those maps have been sort of implemented to practice. For me, it is I don't do theoretical research. I'm interested in implementing the research of these areas to practice. So we designed a competition entry where you have edible and habitable landscape on those cells, and designed breathing walls on the surface here, and you have those semi-interior spaces for cross-species co-living that are migrating, whilst you have climatized spaces that are enclosed, and you have edible and habitable landscape on top. These cells can modify themselves according to social and environmental needs. So depends, if you have a hurricane, they can change, and so on. And if I get to this place, we were using also another research from Cappadocia of cooling from the underground water. And if I should start concluding, basically I mapped different interests or different agents across different projects. I mapped the projects which are from fully open to fully enclosed, and mapped the different agents, how was the interaction between them. And what I found out, the more interaction, the most beneficial to everyone, including human. So therefore, I would discuss the transition towards post-anthropocene, towards biodiversity and climate change adaptation to multi-centered, multi-beings design, so that you appreciate actually everyone and integrate everyone, because it is also the most beneficial to humans as well. we are all dependent on the overall ecosystem, living and non-living. However, our recent economic models do not reflect it. And that's why we are facing the biodiversity max extinction, right? I would discuss the transition from human-centered to non-anthropocentric, which is actually in fact anthropocentric as well, because it's the most beneficial to humans. I would discuss it through research by design, through feedback loops, collective gigamapping using digital technologies, ecosystemic prototypical interventions, through hyper-objective relations, and historical reference studies. The transition from what Jan Gehl defined as cities for people towards the participation of both biotic and abiotic agency in one feedback looping ecosystem, the Real Life Codesign Laboratory. And how I have the future vision of the real life future, the Codesign Laboratory is through living ecosystems community, through small collaborative robots and AI, keeping those ecosystems going and making decisions on behalf of other species, because we cannot make the decision on behalf of the butterfly. And blockchain regenerative economy, where in this system the AI decides on behalf of the butterfly that it will buy its meadow. So the living ecosystem community is through co-design, DIY prototypes and robots, redesigned through real life, the small collaborative robots and AI, the DIY ecosystem building, the real life maintenance through robots and machine learning, the real life redesign through robots and machine learning. Therefore, you generate the system where different beings have participation. And the blockchain regenerative economy, which is integrating biotic agency appreciation, abiotic agency appreciation through real-time values redesigned from the bottom up. What is interesting about the blockchain economy is, like, what is important there is that blockchain was developed in the economical crisis of 2008, when the banks just put everybody down, and then the blockchain was developed, which is like not having control of the banking, and it's controlled from the bottom up through the communities. So that's something we would like to integrate for the future. So thank you very much, and I hope you have some questions. I will just stop sharing my screen. I hope I was clear. Maybe not. Dulmini, you are muted.
Yeah, thanks, Marie. That was very clear, and I think I think they have a lot of questions possibly. I also have a few. So I guess, I would let the students or anyone else who's here, who's listening to your work, does anyone have a question? You can either ask directly, or you could also type in the chat for those of you who want to do it that way. Yes, Johanna, please.
I have a question. Like, first of all, thanks a lot. It was really interesting, and those gigamaps you presented, I think, really impressive, and there's lots of data. And I would be curious how the whole research process was in gathering those data, and how you also, in the first place, got in touch with the needs of the birds, for instance, and if you collaborated also with other researchers that are more in the biology field, and how this whole process from like gathering the data into like the final product of the map, how this looked like. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. When we start the project, we start with giga mapping, which is like in that state. We get an ecologist acting on behalf of other species. So we have ecologists that are representing the other species and they are acting on their behalf. But we also find it important, or the most of important, integrated into the Real Life Codesign Laboratory. When you place the prototype into the real life, the other species start co-designing with you, and at that moment you really don't need any interpreter anymore, because the other species start acting. There is a fantastic field in interaction design that is trying to interact with other species. But at this moment, it's like in that stage of making pigeons, or making other species play computer games, but it is not really in that stage that they could actually really say what they want. Hopefully this field will develop, and yeah, it were penguins in the zoo playing computer games, and they managed to play computer games together. But it is not at that stage that we could use these results for co-design. So we co-design with having like human representative on behalf of those species, and then when we place those things into the Real Life Codesign Laboratory, then every actor takes their place on them all.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have a question?
Yeah, Florian, please unmute yourself.
You're muted, yeah.
Sorry, I'm struggling with my computer at the moment. I was wondering how the process is in the co-designing with different generations and people of different backgrounds. Like, could you tell something more detailed so we can imagine a bit how it works?
Yeah. Yeah, people with different backgrounds, and sometimes it's very conflicting sides, and sometimes people who get invited comes with very strong prejudice, like we try, but we really don't want to come because we don't want the situation to change, and you want the situation to change. Like when I was showing the project from practice, I didn't go too much into detail with that. It was actually like a gardening colony, which Prague 22 wanted to. There were ecologists in the governance of Prague 22, and they wanted to build the biocorridor. So they bought the land of the gardening colony and wanted to build a biocorridor across the other forests where this gardening colony was sort of like problematic. And basically they said to the allotment people that they will have to move. And they invited us to co-design the situation that people don't get upset, and somewhat we generate the situation which will be accepted by the public, which will be accepted by the community of allotment colony, and which will be accepted by other people. So we invited them also. The people from the allotment community just came like, okay, we are not going to be happy, so we just need to be there because we don't want to be excluded, but whatever you do, we will not be happy because we just don't want the situation to change because we have our allotments, right? So when we asked everybody to map their own minimap, and sort of map their own universe. This is my universe. I want my allotment community, and I want my allotment. And other people mapped like I want place for my kids to play. Other people mapped I want some recreation area. The ecologists mapped I want hedgehogs to have their own space. And when they all mapped, and when we asked them to present their minimaps, their universes, and they were all presenting, and they generated empathy. He said, okay, this person really wants an allotment. This person really want the hedgehogs to play around. And then we were searching how to generate it together, that the people who want to grow something can still keep some spaces to grow something, that they could even educate the local school how to grow things, and how the hedgehog could be living in that. And we mapped all those things together. And sometimes it is very interesting how those people who sound like from being very conflicting side find synergy, and they are very surprised themselves, like okay, we understand each other, and we can find calm zones and loud zones, because young people want concerts, elderly people want to have relaxing parts, and we could find out that we can do that as well together with other species. The other species also don't want loud zones, and so the other people can be observing deers, while some young people can have playground, and so on.
Thank you very much, Marie, for that. And I think I would want to add to that and kind of expand the question as Florian asked, because I think this is where I think your idea of co-design also kind of touches on this question of a wicked problem, right? So for those of you who are here, I mean, who are not aware of a wicked problem, it's a kind of word that comes from the work of Horst Rittel and Weber in 1973. They have this first paper, and they kind of distinguished between what we call like normal kind of a problem and a kind of a wicked problem, and all design problems are or tame and wicked problems, and then wicked problems are basically all design problems, and they're complicated not because of its technological complexity, but because that different people have different ideas about the problem itself. So I think this is what Florian mentioned by this kind of, the conflicts between different communities, or also the different age groups. And like, so how do we frame the problem in the first place then becomes a problem, right? And in Marie's case, what's interesting is she goes beyond this normal kind of human community stakeholder kind of discussion to also include the non-human. So I guess my question to Marie is like that, because I think this will also be very helpful to some of the questions that like the students have in terms of, developing a complex map when they work with this question. Like if you can go back to that slide where you show us this kind of mini map, how that connect to the giga map, and how that then goes into your prototype, and then how it kind of feeds back. So this kind of process that you have drawn, which I think is also at the center of your practice. And if you can elaborate on that a bit for our students here, so that they may also kind of find ways to, develop something like that. Because as far as I understand it, that map, you start from the beginning, but the mapping goes on till the end, and even there's an afterlife of it, right? After the project. Yeah. So if you can,
I can share my screen again to get to that slide maybe. I mean, my work, all my work is feedback looping process, and what I claim it is my work is process based, so it actually never finishes. It's like process based design. So actually, when we place something into real life situation, it is not finished product. I hated the term product, because product sounds something like being finished, And in my work, there is no final product. There is nothing like that. Therefore, we call it prototype. Prototype is something that is testing something through the interaction. And through that interaction, you test the prototype, and you kind of redesign that prototype based on this interaction. So this is the feedback loop from the Minimap. There you start relating all together. But I mean, all of this, I mean, this goes in circles, right? People draw their minimaps, integrate them in the gigamaps, and this goes very circular. And for gigamapping, we do a lot of prototyping. We place objects on the gigamaps and relate those objects in gigamapping, and again it goes in minimapping and gigamapping feedback loops. And then when we get to the full-scale prototype, when we really put something into the what I call Real Life Codesign Laboratory, which is the full-scale prototype, then there is a reflection. It's a reflection in action, right? You are realizing how this has been suitable, non-suitable. It is a reflection not only by you, it is reflection to all the stakeholders at the place, because it is in real life. What is important about Real Life Codesign Laboratory? The Real Life Codesign Laboratory is not like a traditional laboratory, is reductionist, right? You try to put things apart and search for one certain property, and you test it, and then you try to put it to real life, and it doesn't work because it excludes it's from the real life environment. The Real Life Codesign Laboratory is something that is testing through the complexity of real life, and it is discussing the wicked problems. It is actually about the wicked problems of the real life, what can appear, who can appear, and sometimes you realize, you know, for instance, the bird I shown, that is something our graphic designer took a picture of, which we were like, oh, so fantastic. We didn't really expect it, and then we made the research further. It is actually very important for the species to have place to sit. So not everything you can know at the moment when you are placing the full-scale prototype, and therefore you are reflecting and redesigning. So it goes again in feedback loops here, and it goes in feedback loops here. So this is all circular, and there is nothing that is finished.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And I think, I mean, what I'm trying to get at is also, one thing, the way you just kind of explained it now, and the way you kind of contrasted it with the kind of classical laboratory, is also that something really relating to Bateson's reconfiguration of the idea of a feedback loop. First, so those of you who have read Bateson's work, I mean, there's this kind of very interesting idea about circularity, which is multidimensional, then kind of like complexity across kind of stacked hierarchies. And it is basically what Bateson was also doing, was critiquing this very scientific idea of feedback. And I think to some extent what Marie is exploring has that kind of complexity. And I think it's fascinating. And for those of you who are interested in like the different components of Marie's diagram, remember there is like for the mind map, that would be the more personal. And then when it comes to giga mapping, which is much more the multi-stakeholder part, there is a literature on this, both produced by Marie, but also other researchers like Berger, Sebalson, and all that. And then you can also search for that. There's a lot of research there. And then, you know, if you want to use those maps, you can kind of go in depth into that kind of research. Do we have more questions? Guido?
Yes, maybe.
Yes.
First of all, thank you for your amazing presentation. I really like the project. I just have a question about maybe the political layer of the whole project. Have you been engaging with different political stakeholders? Because you started the presentation by saying that your projects never got vandalized, for example, which seems like a political wicked problem. And then you said also that you had only 100 euros for one project. What's the funding and what's the relationship basically with with political stakeholders?
Yeah.
That would be the question.
Yes. Yes.
And also, sorry, in a political level, how do you think this operates, like within the current political situation in this part of Europe?
Yeah. I mean, many projects which I was showing are either done through my NGO, and we were receiving fundings from actually also from private or from the state, both perspectives, but we were always apolitical in a way of this. We were receiving fundings also from Norway grants, and those projects are kind of political, but are in line with my political visions, which means that those projects were like had to meet the targets of good governance. They had to meet the targets of gender equity. They had to meet targets on sustainability. I mean, that would be nothing I would have problems with, but yes, you had to address political things. Many of those projects were through my education, through my teaching. So they were done by my students, and obviously, I mean, the projects we did in Cardiff, that would be, for instance, mainly Chinese students, and we would kind of they had like a very sort of cultural shock, let's say, because they were coming from China, and they had different political perspectives, and they were but they were very interested in how to integrate communities, and they are very open-minded. It's incredible, like those Chinese students coming from very different contexts, they are incredibly open-minded, and they are interested to learn whatever you can bring them, and because it's their mission, they go abroad to learn different perspectives. So they were completely new to that situation, that the community is involved, and how you should integrate with the community. And we were often discussing the thing, how can they integrate it in their Chinese practice, because they were not sure like whether the knowledge they get from us in the UK can be applicable in China. And we were trying to find the situation like you know, not just that we give them the diploma and they get a lucrative job based on our good marks, but also like how they can continue the mission, because they were very engaged in this. But yes, most of my work was done through NGO or through academia. It's more difficult in practice, and to be honest, I also we started my practice, and I found out that I get better paid when I do my NGO rather than practice, because nobody wants to pay for me in a practice. That is true. It is actually very changing, because when I built my field through NGO, I started to be contacted by governments, by municipalities, by different practices, like, you know, like big developers like Skanska or things like this, that actually started to find out that they need to integrate those methodologies as well. So they would never let you do that as your employee, but suddenly they started realizing we need somebody for co-design to build big building development. So it is feedback looping, right? I was very unappreciated in practice 10 years ago. So I started doing my work through NGOs and different perspectives, and then I actually now I have very good paid commercial tasks for bringing co-design and bringing these perspectives to financial sector. But yet, I mean, if there is a question, I am the member of Green Party.
Thank you for that, Marie. So do we have any more? You can also, of course, make a comment or a kind of, I see Florian again, or Sonia first then? Or Florian, is it a comment? Okay, Sonia then.
Okay, then I would continue following up with your line of thought. I would like maybe to have it more clear, how does it work, this process of integration of knowledge and methodologies? Do you consider it when you're selecting your team? How do you process all this information coming from all these different fields?
Well, I mean, it is always a very difficult question, right? You never know how to select the best team. We basically, like, what we do, we are already a team of interested people. I typically build my teams based on the disciplines I need. Basically, I need somebody to do this task, so therefore I get a person who has expertise in that, and we build this first team. Then during the design process, we find out, like, for instance, with that insect hotel, we found out that we need a dendrologist to tell us, like, whether the tree won't suffer if we put the insect hotel on it. So it comes with the design process that you find out we need to find the people with this expertise and that expertise. And I mean, nothing is ever perfect. Obviously, you cannot have everybody represented in the team, and that's the unfortunate situation with co-design, and we all suffer with that. However, it's better to integrate someone than no one. So it's never perfect, but typically during the process we find out we need this representative and that representative. So we first build the small team of the people which have expertise for the project we need, and then it starts expanding. We need people with this expertise and that, and obviously we also integrate communities, so we go into the communities, and it's also never so easy, you know. You put the posters, come to our meeting, and nobody comes. Typically we just run to a pub and start integrating with people, or if you have events when you offer, typically if you have event where you offer booze or food, people come. Otherwise it never works. That's the tricks. So it's never too easy, so easy, like you always have to be like, what is my kind of advice to everybody? You have to be master of improvisation. So if you see at the moment something is not working very well, you have to react and change it. Master of improvisation is the most important thing within design, I believe.
We have another question, so from Stephanie, because her camera doesn't work, I think it's already posted here, so I will kind of rephrase it or kind of read it aloud. So she says, communication seems to be one of the most important key aspects of your work. Did you train yourself in special techniques of communication, or is it more kind of intuitional?
That's the thing of master of improvisation. I'm not perfectly trained in anything. Like, I mean, sometimes I had some trainings about how to communicate, and specifically about ethics. I took the course because that is very important area, how to act ethical when you do those interactions, because it's not so easy, and something we thought before would be normal, like taking pictures of children. When you've seen in my presentation, taking pictures of children with interacting with other structures, now it would be illegal. That time it was legal, and you have to have all the confirmations of their parents and everything, and you have to have people who take care that nobody is marginalized or anything, and it is very important. So I took courses definitely in the terms of ethics, knowing how to interact with the stakeholders, and how to publicize the data about stakeholders, because it's not always so easy, and it is very critical issue at the moment. But the interaction, we use social media, we communicate with, we identify the like stakeholder groups, like the local scout or things like that. Would you want to work with us? Things like that, but not really that I would take. I took actually interaction design course at my master studies, which yeah, that was at the Oslo School of Architecture when I was taking the my architecture design course. We could go interdisciplinary, and I took interaction design course. So I have some knowledge in interaction, but I'm not perfect. It would be great to have interaction designer in the team who would help with that. But at least definitely I'm you have, if you do interaction, you have to be acknowledged in the ethics of interacting with people, because it is a critical field now. And you have to make sure that nobody, you know, like you, some photographs that were used before could not ever be used anymore, and you have to make sure that nobody is marginalized.
I guess Florian had a comment.
I mean, maybe it's a stupid question, but do you have like a certain mindset of whom are you building for?
Who I am building for? I'm not building for anyone. I'm not building for anybody. It is discussion about building with rather than building for. When you have this discussion, it is like co-creative act, and as I said, it's process based. So you have no final product. I build this thing for you. There is nothing like that in my work. So we discuss co-creating together, having more livable futures, or we are building for livable futures, or sustainable futures, or happier futures, or flourishing futures. but we are not building for anybody. It is multi-stakeholder design or multi-objective design, and we don't really believe in building for somebody, because then it's a wicked problem. If you build for somebody, it's a wicked problem, because then you build the family house for somebody as an architect, right? And then the neighbors get upset. So the house becomes problematic because the neighbors become upset. So if you are co-creating together for sort of flourishing futures, where we are designing for synergy. And it's like, as Donella Meadows said, like modeling through the problematic. So we are not believing that we will have the answer. It's not for the problem solving. We will not have a problem, the answer. We are modeling through the problematic, and we are sort of modeling through the problematic for the synergy.
And thank you for kind of making that reference to Donella Meadows, which is, I think, another kind of a good systems thinker for all of you to kind of start looking at. And she has also worked at very different scales and also very different kind of organizational scales, like what to design and how to kind of even redesign certain organizations, I guess. And I think this very difference between building with and building for, which kind of then comes centrally or kind of relates back to Bateson, because are we thinking or kind of looking at a pattern, or are we kind of designing with a pattern? And I think that is for Bateson, that's the biggest difference between the designing with living systems and kind of designing, kind of freezing life in your design, right? So designing with living systems, which means you're always looking or working through patterns, and you're never trying to kind of from the outside try to read a full pattern, because that becomes, I think, is the methods that get kind of at one level totalitarianized, right? So that is a distinction that also Bateson makes. And every time you refer to Batesonian pattern, I think that's something that you can kind of try to think about. I think John mentioned this as well in his presentation. So I think we have Jennifer. Jennifer, do you have a question or so?
Yeah, I would have one. Just first, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. Really inspiring. And I was wondering, you talked about the transition towards the post-anthropocene. So your method is between theory and practice. You said you want to adapt to climate change, but who or what has to adapt? Is it like the designed object, or is it this participatory process that we have to adapt to climate change? So the human and non-humans, or the new designed, you avoided the word product, but the new design we kind of come into being in the world or in the real life.
The thing is in my work, I don't differentiate the design and the process. That's probably what is the most confusing, because the process is the design for me, as I'm saying, that you never have the final product. So it is both in one. But I mean, what do we need to adapt to climate change? We all need to adapt to climate change, and that's like all ecosystem, including humans, have to adapt to climate change, because that is something what is here. It's here, and it is happening, and we need to kind of reflect on that. I mean, we have these wonderful snowstorms now in Europe. That's fantastic. Typically, they would come a little bit later, right? But at least what I know, I just moved to Germany recently, but I believe Germany was really suffering this summer from the climate extremes, right? maybe climate extremes is better word than climate change. We are suffering with climate extremes that are like extreme droughts, extreme floods, extreme heats, extreme freeze. We need to reflect on that, and we need to think of how, and even like like there is the discussion like about invasive species. I think we have to accept that we have invasive species now because the ecosystem migrates, because part of our planet is getting warmer than the other, and if we want to have any biodiversity, we have to even accept that we have different biodiversity than we had before, rather than trying to preserve the previous one that cannot sustain here anymore, because otherwise we are just all going extinct. So we need to deal with all those things. We need to adapt our architecture, we need to adapt our designs for actually supporting each other and living together with climate change.
Just to kind of add to that, like, because no one really touched upon that aspect of your work, which is like how you are now kind of, I think recently also starting to connect this to kind of machine learning and the kind of, let's say, the non-human, but in that aspect of the non-human. How is that working out? Like, what are your challenges there? Or is it like, has it been like a productive aspect of your work, or there are a lot?
It's rather the vision for the future. We haven't started with this research yet, but we would really like to, and we are applying for funds for that. So the idea is like to generate the economy where multi-species perspectives is included. So the butterfly gets paid for the pollination, and those decisions would be made not based on humans, but based on artificial intelligence. So the artificial intelligence would decide what is the best for the butterfly, to integrate it and be active part for the economy, because as I said, the interaction design is not that far, so we cannot find out what the butterfly wants. So this would be the part of the integration of the ecosystem in the economy. So machine learning in this part, and also like we want to integrate the architecture that would be maintained by the artificial intelligence, by collaborative robots. That would because if you build those ecosystems facades, they often die very soon, right? Everybody has seen that. So they have to be using machine learning for keeping it up. So that's two layers of using artificial intelligence.
That sounds very promising. I was actually, well, my question was more phrased on this kind of second connotation of using the AI system as a kind of to keep the system running, right? And
yeah.
As a kind of, then it becomes another agency in itself. And if it's running, that was my question also, like, have you encountered problems with that, and how is that? But I guess it's like for the future.
That's the future tasks. We are now like conceptualizing that and applying for funds to start the research. So that was something like saying for the future vision, which we hope we get funded. Cross fingers for us. But at this moment we are not as far yet.
Great. So do anyone, like we have other also like guest listeners, do you have questions for Marie, or no comments? Nothing. Okay, Nicholas. Yeah. And Johanna. This could be the last two, and then we'll be done.
It's just an added question, because you mentioned earlier in your lecture thanks for your lecture. It was quite very interesting. You mentioned education with the kids, or in this multi-perspective process, and where you teach them in Prague how to mix the bird foods, I think. And could you specify a bit more? What do you think? What role in terms of participation will play our future education system to make people, especially younger people, aware and value of multi-perspective complexities on earlier ages?
Yeah, that is actually very interesting. You know, I was so impressed. I was for Czech national elections this October, and in Czechia you do elections in the primary schools, and I was actually impressed how the young generation was integrating in the elections. They all put trees on. They made a big exhibition, and they were all full of forests and birds and animals. and I was thinking they all want you to vote to the Green Party. Unfortunately, they didn't make it, so it didn't happen. But I mean, you perfectly see what was the message of the young generation. When making exhibition for the election, they all made exhibitions about the forests and nature. The new generation perspective is incredibly important because it's about their future, and you have to discuss their future, and you have to. I mean, you know, I'm actually the person who doesn't have children, and I don't want to have children, and I'm decided not having children because I believe what is the planetary status at the moment is not actually like offering a good future to the new generation. So I don't want to bring kids to this world. I mean, I think people are overpopulated anyway, and all those things. But I mean, the thing is that we are actually like our generation is not offering a good future to the new generation, and I believe for the parents who didn't make the decision like me, like for instance for my nieces and for my nephew, which I love as if they were mine. I think we need to build a good future for them. And if you see the new generation, they are very attached to nature. And you see that it's actually, I think even my generation, when we were kids, we were all attached to nature. I think maybe every youth person is very strongly attached to nature and to grandparents. And you know, I think actually like saying that people can make decision after 18 is completely wrong, because when I, for instance, seen that exhibition at that primary school, that young kids would elect the nature, I think they are more sensible than whoever went to elect, because the elections didn't work. So I think saying that people are sensible after 18 is actually completely wrong. It makes no sense.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think this intergenerational learning, I think, should also be part of all our efforts. In some senses, also the design efforts, something that again goes back to Bateson, because if you look at his book, Ecology of Mind, you will see there's this section called metalogs. And metalogs were developed with his children. So it's a kind of discussion which he kind of had with his two young daughters who were very, very young at that point. And then, you know, it was kind of, you see in this metalog how they intergenerationally, it's not like one person passing on the information to the other, but like together kind of construct some notion of a particular idea. And that's something Bateson also actively tried, I guess, at least in the context of home. So something that I think all of you can think about and learn from also Marie's work. And so we had one, that was Johanna. So you can make that comment, Johanna.
Yeah, maybe one quick question. It was also going in the direction of education, because your work is like really shows these punctual interventions. You're intervening also with artistic matters, and I'm curious about like how to also shift in a more like setting of mindset in the educational system, like what you maybe encountered in your teachings at university, but then also on the level of the stakeholders right now, also in terms of architecture and engineering, we need to adapt for the climate change, and also really in the hard science in terms of engineering, like in terms of building materials. When you look at Frankfurt, we have all those skyscrapers, and those materials won't fit in the future. So also like maybe in combination of IA, do you have some maybe thoughts for the future, how to communicate also with these fields, or how to spread these thoughts, so it maybe also has the potential to cross the borders of this niche we're still in?
Like our idea is to interact through the app that engages people in DIY, because you can then build the things from the bottom up, right? So we are introducing these recipes to the people, like you can do on your balcony, or you can so you have this field of the skyscrapers. They have a window. I mean, skyscrapers probably not, but I mean, the building you live in, you can open the window and you can hang something for. You can hang a bird feeder, or you can hand the bird box, or things like this. So we are trying to, or you have some space in front of your house or something. We are trying to motivate people to actually integrate those things in the urban environment, to change it from the bottom up. And what is very important, that if you start changing from the bottom up, it gets reflected on the top down level. The thing I said about Skanska that contacted us about like, okay, we need to integrate co-design. We heard you are doing that, right? They haven't been interested in that 10 years ago, because there was not request. When they see that that people are not accepting them anymore because they don't integrate them, they actually, those, they make the economic strategy, they reflect the market. If people say we want the ecosystem, and many people now say we want ecosystem in our housing, because there has been lockdown, all those things, so people couldn't go to parks, couldn't go to forests, and the only place they could go was parks and forests. They started to care actually if their apartment has balcony or not, because suddenly they were locked in their apartment. So therefore these things are changing. So, and I mean, all those big players who act top down have to reflect that, because otherwise they don't sell, and they are not stupid, they want to sell. So so they need to respond to the needs of the bottom up, the bottom up and the top down always needs to sort of balance themselves.
So thank you very much, Marie. So I guess, I mean, with that, we are coming towards the end of our kind of like the time window. And so I guess that was our third guest lecture. We have one more to go after Christmas. And this one, it's yet again by a practitioner, but more on in the context of music. And he has also this very interesting running project called Animals and Synthesizers. So for those of you who are interested, you can also
we will join too.
Yeah, visit, and then he will also talk from his, I guess, practice perspective. So thank you very much, Marie, again, for being with us and sharing these amazing ideas. And I think all of us got a lot of inspiration on actually how to put some of these ideas into practice and start something, I guess. And also thank you very much for all the participants who were here throughout the whole kind of presentation. And for the people in the class, I will kind of send you a mail. We can discuss some things about like how it's going to proceed after the break. And for the rest of you, thank you very much again. And then I hope to, I guess, see some of you again for the next guest presentation. Right?
Thank you so much. We will be definitely joining the next presentation. Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.